It's time to get nerdy, y'all.
A little bit of gaming history for you.
Something relevant in gaming and discuss our opinions on it.
Should we kick it out of here, or should we kick-start it?
This is the part where you, the listeners, try to stump the hosts.
I'm not a lawyer. I just play one on a podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, lads and lasses of all ages, welcome to the show. It is Monday, June 30th, and it's time to get nerdy. Welcome to episode 347 of Two Nerds in a Pod, the nerdiest gaming podcast in the multiverse. I am one of your hosts, Maction, and I am joined by my co-host, my friend, my pal, and a confidant, but we all know him as Mr. Nice Guy 425. And to anyone new to the show, we will take you through news, history, trivia, lawsuits, and everything in between as it relates to our favorite art form, video games. But before we get there, Mr. Nice Guy, it's been a couple of weeks since we've been able to record the show. How you doing, man? Anything new going on?
I am doing amazing, and I don't know what the last thing I shared with you was, but lots of fun stuff has been happening in the Nice Guy household, outside of the norm. Today, took a day off work, went to a place here in Wisconsin called Bay Beach, which is effectively like an amusement park, but more family geared. And so we went there, we rode the roller coaster, we rode the rides, we had some cotton candy, got some balloon animals, had a nice lunch, did all the things, brought our own lunch, hashtag baller on a budget, right? But had a great time in the sun with some friends who were visiting from out of town. So that was dope. And then a couple weeks ago, took my wife on a super fun date. We do dates every Friday at least, to go see Daniel Tosh, who some of you may have heard of. Tosh.0, right? Yeah. His act, very different than Tosh.0, the show. And it's interesting, Mac, because the thing I love about stand-up is I can watch a comedian who says things that I don't agree with and be like, I may not agree with what you're saying, but that's a brilliant way of putting that. You made it funny. You thought of any counterpoints that people might have. And that's how I try to write. So I respect someone who writes that way. We had a great time at that show, Riverside Theater, here in Wisconsin. And that's it, man. Couple fun things.
Well, over here, I went to the Renaissance Fair in Canby, Oregon, because I'm over here on the West Coast. It was a much larger Renaissance Fair than I'm used to. Still a good time, though. Lots of vendors, lots of events. There was even this show called Shakespeare and Dragons, which was a sort of blending of an improvisational Shakespeare retelling with monsters from Dungeons & Dragons. Involved a giant 20-sided die that they would roll. They picked characters from random Shakespeare shows and monsters from Dungeons & Dragons to provide the sort of antagonism. It was very interesting, a fun time, and I'd absolutely do it again if given the chance. But yeah, had a great time, had the nephews, took them around. I had been saving up dollar coins from the bank. Every time I'd go in, get a few more.
Nice.
And so I gave them money so that they could pay in gold at any of the various things, because those $1 coins are vaguely gold.
Nice. I like it.
And so they're hauling around like, oh, the money's like, oh, it's $5 here. And they put it was a good time. A good time.
Yeah, that's hilarious. Just making it be like, oh, yeah, here's the $5. It's so expensive.
You really feel the weight with it when you got to count out those $5 $1 coins.
So that's so funny because it reminds me of like a little bit they did on 30 Rock, I think it was, where it was a game show, and instead of just like holding a briefcase with money, you know how sometimes like there'll be like models on a game show and you have to guess, like pick one of them and then answer a question, and they're holding a briefcase and then they open the briefcase. It was like you're winning gold. And so they were holding a briefcase full of gold, and so they were like, try to guess which one. And she was like holding it and shaking because it was so heavy.
That strikes me as one of those things where Jack Donaghy is just like, hey, it was a financial failure.
It was a financial failure.
Who could have seen it?
A bad investment. Well, Mac, on that note, do we want to talk about any award shows or anything before we dive in?
Yes, I'm so glad that you asked. Mr. Nice Guy, as an announcement, by the time most people are hearing this, it will be Podcast Awards voting time. And also, if you are here checking us out because you saw us on the list of nominees, thanks. But until the end of July, but hopefully you should do it sooner rather than later, remember to go to Podcast Awards, register so that you can vote, and include on your, on your things, vote for us wherever you can, which would be the general category, as well as games and hobbies, the category that we've been blessed to win multiple times, as well as best Black hosted podcast, all because of me, nothing to do with our friend Lom here.
Don't let Mac's jokes dissuade you from voting for us in that category.
Absolutely. That's the only announcement that we have, but an important one nonetheless.
It is. And on that note, I say we do what we do best, Mac, and hop right up in that gaming news, my friend. What do you think about that?
Absolutely, Lom. I am so out of the loop. What is new in video gaming?
There's a lot, and there's a lot that is recurring themes of things that we talk about on the pod. But before we dive in, thank you again for tuning into episode 347 of Two Nerds in a Pod, nerdiest video game podcast in the galaxy. This first news story comes from GameInformer.com, written by Marcus Stewart. Here is what Marcus writes. Last week, it was discovered that The Alters, 11-bit Studios' sci-fi narrative management game, included undisclosed use of generative AI in its background flavor text, translations, and image assets. The ensuing anger from players has sullied the reputation of the otherwise well-received title, and the developer has issued a response. The Alters launched on June 13th to positive reviews, but the discourse began this past weekend when players began sharing their discoveries of AI prompts for background flavor text as well as translated subtitles. One Blue Sky post showed a screenshot of a computer display with generic science text, accompanied by a prompt reading, quote, "Sure, here's a revised version focusing purely on scientific and astronomical data." Other players found other things. I'm not going to read all this. But here's some quotes from one of the reviews. It says, "Honestly, a beautiful game, but I don't get why the devs felt it was necessary to use Gen AI. The icons for Earth calls seems to use AI. Flavor, blah, 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 blah." Mac, bottom line, this game was getting good reviews. Players discovered it was using AI for various aspects of the game, and now they've turned on the devs. I'll tell you right now, I don't agree with that response. Mm-hmm. I strongly disagree, and I'll tell you why, but I want to hear your thoughts first, man.
Okay, making video games is hard. Doing anything creative is difficult. And look, whomst amongst us hasn't gone... See, back in our day, Mr. Nice Guy, it was SparkNotes, right? You didn't have the time to read the book. You'd hop on SparkNotes, read the synopsis, and try to put your book report out there. Also, at the same time, even in college, I was paying to be there. I was not getting paid to be there. So maybe I can see some frustration at feeling, as though somebody cheaped out or somebody, cut corners for a product that you are paying them for. So I can kind of understand some anger and frustration.
Sure.
As we know, though, it is the categorical stance of Two Nerds in a Pod, a video game podcast, and the express position of Mr. Lom Galuka, also known as Mr. Nice Guy 425.
No, I already know you're going to lie.
We do not issue death threats to
that is true.
video game devs.
Dang.
Yeah, see?
I jumped the gun. He actually is right. We do believe that. We do not do that. That's correct.
We categorically disavow any of that. That kind of anger, that sort of stuff. You try and express your disappointment. You express your hope that somebody does better. But review bombing and death threats, that stuff is not what we stand for and shouldn't be as gamers.
And I don't think that we're seeing death threats here. I think we're just seeing people who are angry about the use of AI. I should add, the article goes on to say that the other big sticking point is their lack of transparency, right? It says, since January of 2024, Steam requires games to disclose if a game features AI-created content, both pre- and live-generated. At launch, the Alter Steam page did not include this disclaimer. So I get why gamers may be mad about that. They may feel like they're misled. But I have always been a big proponent that AI can improve the efficiency of game making in some areas, right? I am not suggesting that we take people's voices and use pieces of people's voice to do the voice acting or steal someone's likeness without their authorization. But I do think that it's potentially good that some of the busy work can be eliminated or cut back by using AI. And the other thing that I've argued is that procedural generation is a form of AI, even though many disagree, and I think Mac may disagree with me on that. So I understand feeling misled, but I don't understand being like, wow, this game is awesome, and then being like, actually, it's not awesome because I don't like how it was made. I disagree with that.
I think it's fair to be disappointed and frustrated because you didn't think AI would be used. I think it's fair to be frustrated that, that a game did not properly disclose what was going on. I think we would also be seeing anger if it had been said that this game will be, you buy it, and that's it, no microtransactions, and then it comes out and there's a bunch of microtransactions in it.
Yeah, that's fair.
I think for a lot of gamers that the frustration is very much on that level. We felt like we were paying for this, we got something that cut corners or was not as described. But,
The best analogy I could use, Mac, one of my favorite movies is Inception.
Yeah.
And I was reading an article about it recently where if you've seen the movie, you know that at the end the character spins a coin, or spins a top rather, to determine if the world that he's in is real or if it is fake. The person who made the movie said the reason that it doesn't show if it's real or fake at the end is because the character doesn't care. He's just happy to be back with his family. And I kind of relate that to these games. There are times where I think AI is not supposed to be used. But generally, if the game is good, I don't care. If it's used to translate stuff, I don't care. You want someone to sit down and translate things and put it all in the game themselves? I don't care. I would rather they spend the time doing other things, and I'm going to enjoy the game regardless. I don't care if the steak is fake, to use another Matrix, or another analogy from the Matrix. Just give me good games, and don't steal people's likeness. I disagree with that. Well, Mac, another news story that came out this week. TechRadar.com, written by Hamish Hector. Here's what Hamish writes. The Meta Quest 3S Xbox Edition is sold out at Meta's own store, but thankfully it's available to buy from Meta's third-party partners in the US and the UK, Best Buy and Argos, for exactly the same price. Although we don't know for how much longer that will be the case. As a reminder, this is a limited edition headset drop, and one that I think you'll want to take advantage of while you can. Why, you ask? Well, I've spent just too much of my weekend playing VR games on the headset using the included Xbox wireless controller and attempting to binge on the Game Pass catalog. I say attempting because my attention has been focused on blah, 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 blah. Mac, the reason that I'm even bringing this up is because we didn't record last week, and it was announced that Meta was partnering with Xbox to put out an Xbox-branded headset. It doesn't do much different than the typical Meta Quest, but it is Xbox-branded. This is the second time we've seen this, because we just saw it with the Ally that's going to be coming out, and now we're seeing it with a headset that doesn't have exclusives. It does come with a controller, but ultimately it's just the same thing with the Xbox branded on it. Thoughts on this, man? Is this the way of the future? And we're going to talk about it later, too, in Topic of the Week.
Okay, so I will say we've seen, I think, an interest of Xbox in getting away from being putting out hardware. And, the more times that I see Xbox branding hardware that they didn't make, the more likely that future seems.
Yeah, and just spoiler alert, we're going to talk about this more, but from a different angle. I feel like they will not fully get out of the hardware space, and maybe I should save this for later. But I think that there's a segment of the gaming population that really enjoys the Xbox controller. So I think that they may get out of the console space, but I don't know that they'll get out of the hardware space. There's a lot of benefits that can come from still putting out things like headsets that work on every platform, meaning PC, PlayStation, Switch, whatever. But I do think it's interesting that they're putting out something where they don't even make games. They don't make VR games.
Not yet.
Well, yeah, and maybe they will, but they're basically saying if you want to play Game Pass, it really can be played anywhere. PC, your PC handheld, your TV, maybe your PlayStation and your Switch someday, and certainly on your Xbox hardware.
Well, wasn't it a couple of years ago that we had one of the leads on, on Xbox saying something like, "Hey, it's time for y'all to rethink what an Xbox is." And I think they were talking about TV integration at the time, right?
Yeah, I don't want to misquote. That may have been Matt Booty who said that. But yeah, that's basically what they're saying is you can play Xbox wherever you want to play it. It's just so interesting to me that it's called Xbox, which is literally like the console name.
Yeah.
And now it's like it's not going to be a box anymore. It's going to be wherever you want to play it, which I get it. I totally get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mac, how far in are we? We have time for one more news story, I believe.
We definitely do.
PCGamer.com, written by Justin Wagner. Here is what he writes. You may remember the clay heads used in dialogue from the original Fallout CRPGs. They've not aged gracefully, what with their stiff animations and pudding-like faces, but you can't tell the full story of how RPG visuals evolved in the late 90s without them. They, and all their sprites in the original Fallout, represent a milestone for the CRPG. And as far as co-creator Tim Kaine knows, their source art assets may just be gone for good. Quote, even though it shipped with sprites, it was a sprite-based engine, they were all made in 3D. They were made in Maya or Alias, Kaine said in a video on his YouTube channel. Those source art files were huge. They were backed up to DAT tape, I don't know what that word is.
They were probably megabytes in size.
Oh, yeah, they were probably tiny. He goes on to say, but I don't know what happened to that tape, and it didn't last that long. They last 5 or 10 years before they start having errors, so I think that source art is all gone. And then, Mac, he goes on to explain, and I'll just kind of summarize from the title, they told him to destroy his backups. People high up at companies take authority, but no responsibility for game preservation. So these things only last a certain amount of time. He had the foresight at the time to say, hey, this is part of history. Let's back these up. And he was told not to by the higher-ups. Mm-hmm. Now, for context, I've worked at, and I know you have worked at many companies as well. Mm-hmm. One thing that some companies have you acknowledge when you start is that anything you create while part of that company is property of the company.
Yeah.
Using company time, using company resources. So where do we stand on this? Fair or foul, dude?
It is a system problem. It is a problem of the system that we've crafted. Basically, that the company says, delete it. And you either decide to be a criminal and err on the side of saving something for the future, or you acquiesce and do what they want and destroy art. And that is a big failing, in my opinion, of the system that we have and the system that we have built over time. So I'd say foul. It's definitely fair in the sense that it's what's required by you, but it is the foulest kind of fair that it could be. Fair play, maybe.
Yeah.
But like foulest kind of fair.
Dude, I always go back. I think about Bungie, right? And they created Halo, but they had a 10-year contract. And so once that 10-year contract was up, it doesn't matter if you were one of the creators of Halo. It doesn't matter if you came up with the story or with the gameplay or whatever. It ultimately was Microsoft's, and they said, we're going to have 343 make the game going forward. Now, this is a very similar situation in that the creator of Fallout here is saying, hey, I wanted to back up these assets. These are going to be a part of history, and maybe we want them in the future. We don't want them to be lost to time. And then his bosses said no. So yeah, it's legal, it's fine, and it's probably ethical, but it's also pretty dang stupid. Why would they not have the foresight themselves to at least back it up? You know, I just don't understand that. They had nothing to lose by saving it themselves.
So I will say this, to kind of devil's advocate here. Sure, it's megabytes for us, but megabytes were pretty big at some point in time. And also, like, if you're transferring that from a magnetic medium like the tape decks or the reel-to-reel type data things, you're putting that on hard drives that are eventually themselves going to fail. I think it very much plays into a sense of laziness. When you allow other people to maintain, when you allow the community to preserve the data, then it's distributed. No one person is taking on the whole responsibility of holding up the world. It's something that can be distributed, the load is shared, and the responsibility is not in one thing. When you're keeping all the data in and jealously guarding it for whatever reason, then whether it gets saved or not comes down to, did it come over in a server migration? Did we prioritize that and do the 3-2-1 strategy? Preserving the data is not a zero cost in terms of both storage or people's time, and I think it is easier than most people think it is, but I think it does speak to... Look, for a little while there, Nice Guy, I worked in an industry that thrived, that catered on people's laziness. That was how it survived, only by people's pure laziness. So I can really appreciate how a lot of people's decisions are probably not based in either, moral good or moral bad decisions, like, oh, I'll destroy history, or I must preserve history, very much rooted in laziness, and I've got other things to do. I can't save space in my brain just there to care about it.
I'll do you one better, and I'll say maybe not laziness, but apathy, right? Like, imagine going to Bobby Kotick and being like, dude, we got to preserve these assets. Right? And him being like, I'm not even a gamer. Like, I'm just a businessman who is, arguably good at running a business, right? Or at least good enough that people put me in this position to run a business. I don't care about the assets. I don't care about history or the preservation. Just make some DLC and make me some money. I'm not saying that those higher-ups that were there when the Fallout game was being made are the exact same way. But maybe they were. Maybe they just were apathetic about it. And that sucks for history. It sucks for us.
Well, I mean, there's a lot. I feel like there's a lot of historical stuff to back it up. A lot of people who were, at the top in the olden days. You read some books like from our friend Stephen Kent, close personal friend of the show.
I know him. I know him well. He's an awesome
dude. You do, yeah. He's a great guy.
Great guy.
And by extension, I too know him, the transitive property. But the way that I'm going for is that we know from the reporting of the past that a lot of people who were in charge of the companies making video games early on weren't really gamers. We have some game studios like id Software where, everybody there was a gamer, but a lot more like Atari where most of the people higher ups were marketing. They were, they were in the business of money, not the business of games. And, maybe you're right. Maybe that's how it went.
Maybe. We'll never know. And that's been news for the week.
Now, let's turn to a little bit of gaming history. Just to share with the people who are listening, we don't really, prep our topics to discuss together. We very much do our own stuff and bring it together at the night.
Yeah. That way we get real reactions. This is all improv.
Exactly. What is interesting is how much of a bittersweet ending that was to news. And the bittersweet's going to keep on going for history this week because we had some fantastic highs and some real lows, I would say, in this week in years before. One of the highs, the Nintendo 64, with all the lovely things that came with it, like Super Mario 64, a fantastic game. Another high, 2022, Sonic Origins, right? Released on all the modern consoles, but a game very, very much a sweet sort of story, as this is what happens when a fan gamer is so excited about Sonic reproducing the Sonic feel, so much so that Sega reaches out and is just like, hey, why don't you make a Sonic game for real? Come in under our wing, and we will give you the stuff to put out a real Sonic game with our stamp and seal of approval on it, not just a fan game. Lovely. Well, and then we've got some of the bitter, like in 2016, Mighty Number 9. Unfortunately, a game that tried to be Mega Man and flew too close to the sun. But the two things that I really want to bring up are both related to the IP of Alone in the Dark. An old video game back in the old DOS days.
Yeah.
It was this last couple of weeks in 2008 that we got a new game, Alone in the Dark. In 2008 for PC, PS2, 360, Wii. I played it on PC personally. And it was an interesting game. As a concept, it was kind of incredible. Nice Guy, just before I get too far into it, did you ever play or see any of the 2008?
I never played that game, man.
Okay, what could be cooler, Mr. Nice Guy, than a inventory screen that doesn't pause the game when you open your inventory? Huh?
That actually sounds like a pain.
A pain, but it's realistic. Okay. How about this?
It is realistic. That's fair. It's realistic.
You tell me this, Mr. Nice Guy. We all know inventory space. The coolest thing ever is limited inventory space, right? So,
Stop it.
What could be better than opening up, then your inventory screen is you, first-person view, looking down at your open trench coat on the limited sort of slots in your like the items literally stowed in pockets and such in the trench coat.
That actually would be kind of
Yeah.
cool, but I don't like over encumbrance. But I get what you're saying.
Okay. So this is the interesting thing about Alone in the Dark. It had a lot of very interesting concepts, but like not all of them worked necessarily so well. It was primarily first person view. And like some of the enemies would like projectile vomit into your face, and then you would have to click in the thumbstick to blink your eyelids in order to clear and get your vision clear again.
Interesting.
You could combine things on the fly, making Molotov cocktails, tossing those things and shooting them. Fire was kind of the only really effective thing. But I think one of the most interesting high concept, if you will, components of the game was that it took place after the initial introduction. It takes place entirely within Central Park in New York.
Really?
The entire game set there as you, Edward Carnby, are released from the clutches of some demonic force, and that creature is coming into the world through an opening in Central Park in New York, and it is, for the time being, kind of limited there, and that is your arena, and that is how you experience and participate in the game. A great concept, lots of great ideas in there, but it was a game that kind of failed to bring all those things together in a satisfactory way. And,
Sure.
And the sales, while it wasn't a huge flop, it certainly was not the type of game that made them excited to make a sequel.
Sure.
Which is why we wound up having to wait until 2024, when we got another Alone in the Dark game. But that was earlier in 2024. What did happen at the end of June 2024, though, is Pisces Interactive, the game studio, shut down, as it was one of the 12 studios that was shut down by the Embracer Group, their parent company, and the holder of our 2024 OOF Award for the most game studios shuttered in a year. They did Alone in the Dark 2024 that came out in March, underperformed, and so the Embracer Group shut the whole studio down. Now, much in the same vein as the 2008 game, Alone in the Dark 2024 wasn't a great video game. Frankly, it was pretty middle of the road, and it might have broken even depending upon how much it cost to produce. That information is not available, but we do know it wasn't a huge success, and that's, for some companies, that's what it takes to give you the boot. But David Harbour did the voice acting for Edward Carnby in that game, and they had a few other big-name artists as a part of it as well, puzzles and all the sort of thing. And it was, to hear them describe it, they were like, we want to return to our roots, as it's even set in roughly the same general style of place. Anyway, I could go on for ages about Alone in the Dark. It's got a special place in my heart, as it's one of those games that early on gave me nightmares as a kid, and so it's really up there. But surprisingly, the end of June, just a big time for the Alone in the Dark franchise generally. So that's just been some history for you.
Sometimes all it takes for a game to pop off years later is for one of the voice actors or actresses to get famous, right?
Yeah.
David Harbour, Stranger Things, was just in a Marvel movie.
Of course, to be fair, he was already super famous by the time 2024.
Oh, but 2024, not 2008. Got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
But I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, no, that's dope. Well, cool. Let's keep things moving with our next topic, which is the topic of the week. A segment where we talk about something relevant in gaming and discuss our opinions on it. And Mac, this is on GameSpot.com, and I don't know if you had read this article, but you kind of alluded to it in our news when you talked about Xbox potentially getting out of the hardware business. And here is what this article says by Blair Marnell on GameSpot.com. Next year marks the 25th anniversary of Xbox, but one of the console's original team members, Laura Fryer, is openly questioning one element of Microsoft's gaming division. Fryer, who no longer works for Xbox, recently shared her response to Microsoft's recent handheld and console partnerships and concluded that the company has no desire to create hardware anymore. On her YouTube channel, Fryer noted that the upcoming ROG Xbox Ally handheld devices won't have any exclusive games to drive sales, and Mac and I have talked about that as well, and added that Microsoft's partnerships with Asus on the handheld and AMD on the next generation of Xbox reflect a dim future for its consoles. Here's a direct quote. Obviously, as one of the founding members of the Xbox team, I'm not pleased with where things are today, said Fryer. I don't love watching all the value that I helped create slowly get eroded away. I'm sad because from my perspective, it looks like Xbox has no desire or literally can't ship hardware anymore. So this partnership is about a slow exit from the hardware business completely. Personally, I think Xbox hardware is dead. That's a huge thing to say. And I've alluded to my opinion, which is I think that this references strictly consoles. But Mac, my question for you is not whether she's right or wrong. It's, do you think that if they are out of the hardware business, that it would result in others following suit?
If Xbox is out of the hardware business, if we would have other companies also getting out of the hardware?
Sure. Namely Sony and Nintendo.
So I don't think Nintendo is ever going to leave their side of the hardware business. I think they are too allergic to the concept of sharing any of their stuff on other platforms. I think we were all justifiably shocked when there was a mobile game that involved Mario, and I don't know as we've seen anything since then with respect to Nintendo putting their content on other platforms. Not that I can think of. You?
No, not off the top of my head.
Xbox, after all, they've been pushing for the past little while to be like, oh, hey, look, you can be Xbox on your PC. You can do Xbox on your TV. You can do it on your Xbox. It can be many places.
Sure.
And maybe this is exactly what they want. Maybe this is the 5-year plan to move away from hardware. I don't see any of that wind blowing for Sony. And so I don't think they're in a hurry to get away from putting out their PlayStations. But who knows? Maybe if that is the case, we might see Sony saying some similar things and doing a lot more cross-platform things and easing their way out as well. But I don't think I see the indications there in what Sony has said publicly.
Yeah, so there's a couple things that I think of when I think of this discussion, which is I think that Microsoft can get away with this, and it's obvious, is because they have Game Pass. That's the big thing. The other thing is that they have also purchased up a lot of really, really big studios and companies.
They really have.
And so that makes Game Pass that much more valuable. Now, in order for Sony to go this route, I believe they would need to create a similar service. And I don't know that outside of their personal exclusives, like The Last of Us, like Uncharted, it's funny because there's so many and I'm sitting here now and I can't think of them. But like all of the Sony exclusives, right? Crazy because there's dozens and I'm sitting here not being able to think of them. Point being, unless they were to do a similar thing and buy up some studios to be able to be like, yeah, we have a great shooter. Yeah, we have a great RPG. or series of RPGs that are only going to be on our consoles, I don't know that Sony could make this move.
Yeah.
And I also think that potentially, if Microsoft does get out of the hardware business in terms of consoles, that they actually do make those Bethesda games and those Activision games Xbox exclusive and give up on the money that they get from having them other places. Because that means that they don't have to worry about the lost revenue from the consoles, but they're getting it all back via Game Pass, and Sony is not getting it, Nintendo's not getting it, no one else is getting it, PC's not getting it. So those are my thoughts. One other point, Mac, when I think of Sony and when I think of Microsoft, I don't think of consoles first. When I think of Sony first, I think of like speakers and TVs, at least historically.
Okay.
And when I think of Microsoft, I think of PCs. And so them making this shift, Microsoft as a company, I don't think it's as crazy as we think it is. I think it'll take some getting used to. You know, people have a lot of nostalgic memories of Xbox Live and of Halo and Halo 3. And I think that's what Laura, who was quoted, is getting at. But I think that they move on, and I think they're okay.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I certainly do feel for Laura. It's got to be a big deal to just be like, oh my gosh, what I dedicated so much time to doing, to building, it feels like they're just abandoning it.
Well, here's the last thing I'll say. I think she may be right, but I still believe that Microsoft continues to do things like headsets, controllers, and other peripherals, right? And the reason I believe that is because I believe it was with the Xbox One, so last gen, where they said you can bring your prior console with you. If you have a favorite console from last gen, it's going to be compatible with your Xbox One. And so I think that idea of being able to have something that's Xbox branded is still very important to them. And I think that they continue that, knowing that you can use it with your TV, you can use it with your PC. They're shipping this VR headset with an Xbox controller. So I think that they continue to do that, but maybe they get out of the $500 box.
Maybe. Like you've said before, those things are a loss leader for them. So be nice to have a little less losses.
Yeah, man. Just make it chargeable. No one wants to use batteries anymore. My kids are always asking me to buy AA batteries for the Xbox. This has gotten out of control. That has been our topic of the week.
Well, now we turn to a crowdfunding project that's trying to get off the ground. We call this Kick or Kickstart because we're going to discuss some of the virtues, some of the vices, and at the end, we'll say whether or not we think it should be kick-started or kicked out of here. Now, I have posted a link in the chat so that anybody who's here for the live recording can go ahead and have a look at that as we are looking at it together. And what we are looking at is called Skyless Blind. All right, so what is this? Well, it's a game on Kickstarter. Surprise, fancy that. It cites a game called Yume Nikki, which I have not heard of, as its inspiration for the story, but the art is very much inspired by Hyper Light Drifter, if not quite so refined. Now, mechanically, it is built on RPG Maker as a game system, so it feels much more like an RPG in control style rather than an action game such as Hyper Light Drifter. So just kind of know what you're getting into there. As for pricing on this, it's $12 to $14 for the minimum buy-in. That's because there's kind of an early bird pricing that still has some copies left. $30, though, would get you into the beta access for the game, starting 2 months from the end of funding, 2 months from now, which would be September, and they've got a $20,000 funding goal. Eyeballing a release in Q3 of 2026, so just a little bit over a year from now. And with respect to the team, I do believe that this is a team of, it's a small team. I believe it's just going to be 3, musician, programmer, as well as Near, the person who's putting it together, as being, a lead dev on the project. So small team, $20,000. And in style, in style, you are playing more like like I said, it's a lot more of an RPG. It's got some Final Fantasy feels to it. But yeah, Mr. Nice Guy, now that I've thrown you into the deep end, what you thinking?
I think it looks cool.
Yeah.
There's a lot to like about this. The price point is awesome, right? And we never really talk about Game Pass in relation to Kickstarter, but if you think of the value that people are getting from that service, to come out and say that you're charging $25 for the first indie game that you've ever made is a little absurd unless it's a really, really good game. And there's a lot of value in it. So I think that the price point of $12 early bird is awesome. A year out is not unrealistic. I think $30 for beta access is kind of unnecessary. When you're in this position and you're trying to get word out about your game, just make the beta access open to people who have paid the $12. Yeah, that's my stance there, and that's one thing that I struggle with. I kind of struggle with the team of 3. It doesn't sound like their roles are really strictly defined. I think you said you said musician, programmer, and lead dev. There's a lot of moving pieces that go into a game, and so it's interesting that one person is strictly music, one person is strictly what was the other thing you said? I can't remember. Music, something else, and then lead dev, right? Like, there's so much other stuff that needs to get done to make a game. Marketing, forget about voice acting or the story or whatever may go into it. That worries me. But other than that, this looks dope.
Yeah. So I'm not entirely sure how I feel about the vibe overall in RPG Maker. I have seen that work out well for indie games in the past, but in general, I find it a little bit clunkier than I would like. But my goodness, I appreciate the art style.
Yeah.
And while I'm also not 100% sold on this story from what we find out in the game so far, from the Kickstarter so far, I do feel like it's got just enough sort of cosmic horror to be of interest to me. So I'm cautiously optimistic. And like you said, the price point is pretty good. But you know me, Mr. Nice Guy. You can give me all the renders, all the fancy art, all the promises that you want, and that doesn't mean that you can put together a game. But you know what does?
What's that?
As a playable demo.
Yes.
And what we do have here is a playable demo for Skyless Blind. Matter of fact, it is one of the first things. Play the beta for free, download the beta for your Windows PC, and it'll send you to their website so that you can try it out. Now, inherently, this is a little bit more risky of a project because it's an indie dev's first time making something. It is probably prone to a lot of the things that we will see as time. It'll probably have a delay. It might not. It might have some more bugs than if there was a larger studio working on it. But when we see a playable demo, it means that they can at least bring those components of what a video game takes and put them together. You've got something to try, something to look at, which kind of, for me, gets me past that hesitancy. And so, for me, I'd say $12. Heck yeah, I'll kickstart this one.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. I'm really worried about, and I can't emphasize this enough, the structure and the division of responsibilities. I get having a specialist to program. I get having a specialist to do music. But once again, there are a lot of other things that go into making a game. And also there's a lot of other things that go into getting word out about a game. And so the implication is that all that other stuff is on one person. And I don't think that that's a recipe for success. Regardless, I like this.
Excellent.
Kickstart.
Obviously, we wish everybody the best, but kickstart from both of us. Nier, we wish you the best. Good luck. We're looking forward to seeing the finished product. And that's been Kicker Kickstart.
Yeah, can't wait to see it. Love it. Well, now it's time for Nerdflex.
Woohoo!
A segment where you, the viewers, try to stump the host. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. Mac, you look like you want to say something.
Yes, indeed. This is a sound test episode. So for anybody who's new to it, Every time we do this show, we invite you, the listeners, to share with us some nerdy trivia to stump us. But every so often, we like to turn it around and give you a chance to test your might. And that is with some mystery sounds from somewhere, somewhen, somehow in video gaming. And we keep a set of about 10 mystery sounds open at any point in time. And as we cycle new ones in on sound test episodes, we cycle an old one out. But if you can get these mystery sounds before they've been sunsetted, we will send you a prize, lovingly handcrafted from me, sent to your door. But Mr. Nice Guy, we've got to say adieu to an old mystery sound. That would be the one from episode 307.
Yep.
But before we officially say goodbye, do you want to take one last crack at it?
Okay, I'm going to listen to this and try to figure out what it is. Let's see. Ooh. This is definitely something from a game that I've played.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it sounds like some sort of teleportation. It almost sounds like something from a Valve game.
It does have that feel, doesn't it?
It does have that feel. It sounds like something from a Portal game.
This is indeed a sound that a handheld device makes, but I'm afraid it is not from a Portal game or a Valve game.
Interesting.
This comes from Subnautica. You go ahead and at some point in time, you make basically a handheld gun for lifting and moving things, and that is what this makes. So yeah, Subnautica was the mystery sound from episode 307, and with that, we've got a new one for you. So listen up, and good luck. You'll need it. All right, good luck. And now time for us to get stumped.
Awesome. So if you're here live, you have a job to do. Feel free, if you'd like, to put a multiple choice gaming-related question in the chat. Mac and I will use nothing but our noggins to attempt to answer it. And since, sometimes people are shy or they just don't have a gaming-related question, we have a test bank of randomly generated, not AI generated. So don't get mad. Don't downvote us on the podcast awards. We're disclaiming these are not AI, of questions that we answer. So, Mac, we'll start with that library of questions. The first question is a special round.
Okay, let's do it.
And the question is, name 3 sandbox games.
Yeah, special rounds, we try to name at least 3, but as many as we can. Let's see, sandbox games. Obviously, I feel like, what's that one? 7 Days to Die? Project Zomboid? Minecraft?
Valheim. Are we considering all those sandbox, or are those crafting?
Well, I was going to say sandbox because you can kind of every game has a limit, but all of them you can kind of go wherever you want, whenever you want. I think sandbox and crafting go together very well, but I think the chief consideration of sandbox is just that, you kind of go wherever, do whatever.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I think, what's that game that you play, the farming one? I consider that to be a sandbox. Stardew
Valley? Oh, interesting. I would consider it not to be a sandbox game just because the scope of it's so limited. But, hey, I guess this is where maybe we benefit from the definitions being a little loosey-goosey.
Yeah, I'm looking up sandbox games. So a sandbox game is a game where gameplay element that provides players a great degree of creativity to interact with, usually without any predetermined goal, or the goal that the players set for themselves. Such games may lack any objective, and are sometimes referred to as non-games or software tools.
So I would say, well, technically in something like Minecraft and such, the goal is survive.
Yeah, 100%.
But there aren't smaller goals really. So
right, you just kind of get to play.
Yeah, whatever. Terraria, I would throw in for sandbox.
Yeah.
I mean, what are we up to, 5 now?
Yeah, The Sims maybe, potentially sandbox. So yeah, and it's funny because I accidentally clicked off the card. But all of those are sandbox games. So yeah, we'll keep things moving. So Mac, here's a Metal Gear Solid question for question number 2.
Okay.
What is Emma Emmerich terrified of? What is Emma Emmerich terrified of? It's a Metal Gear Solid question.
Gosh, I don't remember. I'm going to say enclosed spaces, claustrophobia. I'm going to say.
Okay. And that's interesting because there's a lot of like sneaking around through small spaces in this game.
Especially the cardboard box.
100%. And so I'm going to go with something else, though. I'm going to go with like rodents.
Okay.
That she's scared of like those types of small animals or something
it.
like that. All right. Let's see what the answer is. Okay, we were both wrong.
Okay.
It's actually water/drowning.
Oh, okay. Yeah, water is dangerous. I can see that.
Okay, Mac. Another question that's music related. We've had some of these in the past. It's a Nintendo question. Who sang "I'm like Mario on mushrooms, I'm like Popeye on some spinach"? No idea.
I'm going to guess Snoop.
I don't think so. Because it doesn't really rhyme. It doesn't really rhyme. I have no idea, dude. I have legitimately no idea.
Well, I mean, guess somebody then. I mean, come on.
I'm going to go with Lil Nas X.
Maybe.
Maybe?
I'm going to feel so silly if that
All
turns
right.
out to be the correct one.
Let's see what the answer is. I have no idea who this is. Tiny Tempa.
Tiny Tempa.
TinieTemph. I have no idea who Tiny Tempa is.
Never heard of him before either.
But I'm going to go listen to some Tiny after this, and that has been Nerdflex.
Well, now we turn to a little bit of legalese.
Legalese.
I am not a lawyer, but I do like to talk about it on a podcast. So, back in 2023 or so, we learned from the Software Preservation Network that only about 13% of video games published before 2010 are available for purchase. And in the post-2010 era, we learned earlier this year that only about 3% of video games that are online, require a connection from a publisher, have a mechanism from the publisher that will let you keep playing the game after they stop supporting your game purchase. Enter, of course, Stop Killing Games, which we've talked about before, and Ross Scott of the initiative was so kind to come and guest on the show. Now, the end of July is the last chance for anybody in the EU to sign up. And I know we don't have as many EU listeners as some other shows, but I do want to reiterate that any of you should really sign on the Citizens Initiative. And as a full reminder, Ross Scott is reluctantly spearheaded the push to make a Citizens Initiative in the hopes that the rather common practice of destroying works of art, video games, could be curbed. This would require 1 million signatures from EU citizens, but if successful, would require the European Union to create a small commission to craft specific legislation to meet the request of the Citizens Initiative, which would involve the Stop Killing Games reps and the reps from the video game industry giving input to lawyers on the commission as to what legal requirements would be workable, and then the actual lawyers would propose the legal changes, with the goal for Stop Killing Games being that any game that was sold to customers as a product, in the style of a product, that means a game that was sold to you for a one-time purchase, that did not expressly or explicitly tell you, oh, hey, we're going to cut this service in 3 months or whatever, that any game like that sold in the normal product style would have to be left in a, quote, reasonably functional experience, end quote, after the game dev decides to end support, as opposed to what we get now for 97% of games, which is no functional experience. Now, as of this recording, a lot of people have signed on the Citizens Initiative, but there is still a long way to go, and I want to stress again that this is the mechanism by which the EU citizens get to flag a specific relevant issue and then have the technical and legal experts go after the problem that's not well addressed by the current legal or regulatory framework. It doesn't work retroactively, so any game before such law was passed wouldn't be, subjected to that requirement, and it still does take a lot of time to get off the ground, but this is and would be step one in saying, this is a big enough, gamers unite, this is a big enough problem, we want to still be able to play our games after the company has moved on. We don't want the media to just die and go into the ether, but we want to still be able to experience that. We want you, the legislators, to have some specific legal experts look into this and see what you can do about making this work in the future. And one last shout out and thanks to Ross Scott for coming on our podcast back in April of last year to discuss this with us. It still has a little bit more, well, I mean, as of the time you're hearing this, it'll be basically 1 month to sign on to that if you are an EU citizen. So, yeah, just wanted to flag that and remind y'all that there's still time, but hurry.
We're going to see a lot of companies, if this gets passed, change the technical term for the content they're putting out. It's not a video game, it's an interactive experience, right? So that they feel like they're not having to follow these rules.
Or we're going to have a lot of them sell the game from the outset and say, hey, you buy this for $40, we will shut off the servers in 2 years. I would like for them to have to say that, at the very least to say it and be like, hey, we're going to destroy what you love. We're going to destroy it in 2 years. Enjoy it while you can.
All it's going to take is an updated terms of service.
No, because if it is...
all that stuff that you don't read.
Yeah, I am one of the few people in this world who actually does read terms of services. But that's kind of what they said about, about refunds on Steam. But, Australia made it happen, and we, reap the benefits. The European Union can do this, and we would all be better off, I think, by the game publishers being required to leave it in some functional state after it's gone. I think it is worth fighting for, and in this case, fighting for it is just a signature.
Well, cool. Mac, that has been our show, everyone.
Woo!
Thank you for tuning in. And for those of you who are here from the Podcast Awards, please vote for us. If you enjoyed what you heard today and you have a long backlog of stuff you can go listen to if you've become a quick fan of what Mac and I do. Mac, before we go, we have one last segment called What We've Been Watching and What We've Been Playing, where we talk about just that, the cool, nerdy stuff we've been into across all platforms. Shout out to Galvatron. We've missed you, buddy. He's in the chat. If you're here live, you have a job to do. Let us know in the chat what you've been watching and playing, because we're always looking for more nerdy stuff. Mac, what have you been watching and playing the past couple weeks?
So I finished off It Takes Two.
Nice.
Had a great time with that. I've been playing a bit more Baldur's Gate 3. This time around, I'm playing it with mods so that I can have a larger party size, because I think that's just more fun. And I've also been playing some old Flash games. Yes, Flash games from way back in the day that have been released, ported forward onto some modern system. One called Shift. It's a puzzle game. Lots of fun. I think that's about all that I've been playing. As for watching, I've mostly been watching Taskmaster. The new season's quite fun. And I've also been watching, what's the name of it? It's a children's show called Tiny Chef.
Okay.
I became aware of it because a friend who watches it with their kids, it won like an Emmy last year, but has been canceled. And so they sent me some videos, and I've just been watching a bunch of Tiny Chef lately. What about you, Mr. Nice Guy?
Nice. And I see people typing stuff in the chat. One other thing I'd like to add, I'd like to hear if anyone has picked up anything awesome in the Steam sale, because that is going on right now. And Mac, before I move on to what I've been watching and playing, are you planning on, or have you picked up anything in the Steam sale? Just curious.
I have picked up a couple things in the Steam sale. Oh, I also forgot one. Baba Is You. I've been playing that one as well.
Nice.
I picked up... what did I pick up? I picked the Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy.
Nice.
As well
it's like $4, right?
Yeah, it's like $4, as well as a game called Viewfinder that I had been contemplating for a while now. It's very sort of puzzle, but also perspective warping puzzle. It's cool stuff. But yeah.
Nice.
How about you?
Nothing yet, but I've been eyeing Schedule 1 for a while. There's a friend of mine who has mentioned multiple times that it's a very fun game, and it looks like it's like 30% off right now. So I've been thinking about picking it up. But as far as what I've been watching and playing, Mac, I've been doing a little bit of reading. And if you know me, you know that one of my favorite books is Ready Player One, and I wanted to read something that's like Ready Player One, but not the exact same. So I picked up this book called Snow Crash by Neil Stephenson, went to my local half-price books, got a copy of it for a great price, #baller on a budget, and been enjoying that. As far as still watching The Detroiters, and I fear that I'm almost to the end of season 2. One of the funniest shows that I've watched. If you like Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, if you like 30 Rock, if you like that style of humor, it is hilarious. And I've really been enjoying that. What else have I been watching? That's pretty much it. Lots of YouTube, lots of TikTok. Watching some Warzone tips as I've been playing Warzone quite a bit. And then lots of little old school games on my analog pocket when I'm... Mac, what are people into in the chat? We got some good recommendations.
Yeah, so Galvatron's been watching Squid Game Season 3, F1 the Movie, Mission Impossible Final Reckoning, and Elio. As for playing, I'm seeing RoboCop, Rogue City, and Victoria 3 from Rolf. Antonia's been playing EA College Basketball, and Galvatron's been playing Doom: The Dark Ages, Claire Obscura Expedition 33, The Last Faith, Final Vendetta, Double Dragon Gaiden, and Oblivion Remastered.
All those are on sale in the Steam sale. It's so tempting. Everyone's telling me to get Expedition 33. Spennis has referred it to me multiple times. Other people have as well. I have
all
to
these
think
people
about that.
can't be wrong.
Mac,
be like all your friends and express your individuality by buying a copy of Claire Obscura Expedition 33.
it's like a Game of the Year candidate this year, so we'll have to check it out. Mac, we have got to go. We are past the hour. Why don't you take us home?
All right. Thanks, everybody, for coming out to the show and being a part of what made episode 347 legendary. We hope that you will return and join us next time, whether that is coming out to the live show on twitch.tv/2nerdsinapod at approximately 7 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Central on Mondays, or listening to us on your podcast platform of your choice afterward. We also hope that you'll vote for us in the Podcast Awards Best Black Hosted, Games and Hobbies, and the overall People's Choice category. Thank you, everybody, and good night!
Deuces. Be excellent to each other.
Bye.